Hello, this is our second hybrid talk. So that means that we're zooming this at the same time as it's being given to you. And so it's our first time doing it this year. And I think you'll have to expect perhaps some glitches and some late starts. But I think we're okay to start the second section with Ancient Music Ireland. Absolutely fantastic presentation, always one of our favorites. And this year he's got a fantastic new project with the paired horns of Ireland. And I'm not going to say any more because he'll tell you everything. And welcome, Simon and Maria.
Thank you all very much for coming. And we just want to say what a great honor it is to be here again. Thank you so much, Moira, and all the crew of Galway Early Music. We're so happy to be back live in Galway again. And we've come to tell you the story of our latest research into the ancient musical instruments of Ireland and Britain. Now, we start with these two. Now, these two are the first Bronze Age horn ear and trumpet ear made in modernity. They were cast from latex molds of an original pair that you can see in the National, in the Ulster Museum in Belfast. You can go and see them there. And what was always a mystery to us is why they were found as a pair when they're not a pair, even though the two bell ends are the same, pretty much. The two conical ends are the same, but one has an arrangement here on the end of it, and the other has a mouthpiece here in the side of it. And yet they were found as a pair. Now, we couldn't figure that out, but we didn't really go into it that deeply at the time. And it was only in the year 6 when Dr. Peter Holmes, at a conference in Berlin of the International Study Group of Music Archaeology, he, at the end of his presentation, he borrowed these from me, and he held up this one, and he said, male. And then he held up this one, and he said, female. Now, there was about 50 delegates from around the world there, top music archaeologists, and there was a general hum in the room of agreement. Everybody thought he was right. Now, so we went forward with that, and then in the year 12, we went to Nepal to see about long curved horns that they have there. And it turned out that they are used for weddings, and two together make a circle. But each half circle represents a sex, gender, the marriage. One represents the bride, one represents the groom, or of course in our more modern days it can go either way or many ways. But the idea was, again, male and female, making the marriage, making the complete marriage. So we went along with that. And then a couple of months ago, we were invited to play, to present in County Down at a place called Knockivy, which is an ancient inauguration site in County Down. And we were there at a storytelling festival, and also as part of a protest because the local farmer had stuck a windmill on top of it. He used the lack of government in the north of Ireland at the time to be able to slip this through past the planning authority, and now there's war over it, and it's probably going to have to come down again. But as a part of that, I read publications by Dr. Eamon Kelly. You can find him on what's the site where you have the academics? The academics. Academia, well, you all know that. Yeah, so you can get him there. And he had written a paper about Knockivy and about the inauguration of kings and how Bronze Age and Iron Age horns and trumpets were used for the inauguration of kings. And he also discussed the idea, please go ahead. He discussed the idea that of the religion of the time, whereby the male sun god was brought together with the female earth goddess. And when they came together, then at the inauguration of the king or a queen, then all would be right with the world, crops would grow, animals would get fat, people would be healthy. So when we read that, everything sort of clicked together, and we suddenly realized that these instruments are male and female, and therefore their most likely use would be to represent the sun god and the earth goddess. Now, this would explain why they're so expensive, why they're so beautifully made, why the technology of the Bronze Age and the subsequent Iron Age, the absolute top end of metal technology was used to make them. So they were extremely expensive at their time. But if they were going to represent the voices of the god and the goddess, then they would have to be expensive. And that would probably be their primary function. So then we looked at them and we said, now these are Bronze Age, about 1,000 years before Christ. But we want to go back a further 2,000 years. I'll just put these back. "2,000 years earlier, as some of us saw, thank you, showed us a picture of Newgrange. Now we're all familiar with Newgrange, Naud and Dowd, and several other buildings around Ireland and Britain that are planetary alignments from around 5,000 years ago. Now Newgrange, well, more actually, maybe as much as 6,000 years ago. But Newgrange is probably the most stunning and the most important of them, because Newgrange represents rebirth. What they did about 5,500 years ago, they built a long corridor of standing stones and they put a roof on them. And then at the end of them, they put a three-sided chamber. And at the very back of the chamber, there's a stone and it's got a triple spiral carved into it. Now that is the oldest known triple spiral in the world. And what happens on the morning of the 22nd of December? The sunlight comes over the hill in front of the building, and it shines through a little aperture over the door, straight down that passage, all the way down to the little room at the bottom, at the back, in the middle of the building, and then it illuminates that spiral on the stone there in the center of the building. Now, once they built all that, they then put 250,000 tons of stone on top, and a lot of that was big rounded stones that they brought down from Antrim down to the Bóinne Valley, and also tons of white quartz that they brought up from Wicklow. Now, of course, 5,500 to 6,000 years ago, that was a major undertaking. But the idea was to celebrate when they could see within a few seconds that the world, that the year had turned. The sun rose a few seconds earlier, and at that point, it lit up what was in effect the womb of the earth in there in the center of the building. So you have the sun god coming in and then illuminating the womb of the earth. And then the people knew that the new year had begun, and fingers crossed, everything was to be all right. Now, if we look at our Bronze Age horns again, 2,000 years later, but our Bronze Age horns came from something. Now, normally when we do presentations, all our research, it's all archaeologically based. It's very important because we can't afford to be romantic particularly, or nobody will believe us. So we're going to depart this time slightly from the archaeology, in that we're going to look at the precursor to the Bronze Age horns, which of course are animal horns. Now, in this case, cattle. And of course, cattle were the foundation of the society which built Newgrange and Doubt, which built Stonehenge and the Nessa Brodgar in Orkney. They're all similar type buildings. So if you take 2 horns from a cow or a bull, in this case, these are longhorns. You take 2 horns from the cow or the bull, from one cow or one bull. So they're the same, except they're opposite. And then you add an extension, a cylindrical extension onto one of them. That makes it into a trumpet, but it also makes it male. And then you add a mouthpiece into the side of the other one, and that makes it a horn, but it also makes it female. Now, our definition of a horn and a trumpet is that a horn is conical all the way along its length, where a trumpet has a cylindrical aspect to it. So here we have a pair of horns from the one animal, but one is male and the other is female. So therefore, here is the sun god and here is the earth goddess. Now, of course, if you play these, they sound like cow horns. Here we go. Now, you're not going to start jumping around the place when you hear that particularly. It's a cow horn and a bull horn being sounded. How do you make it into an instrument that will play the voice of a god or a goddess? Well, in fact, it's very simple. All you do is alter the shape of your mouth behind your teeth, the positioning of your tongue, in the same way that people sing in Nepal, Tuva, Tibet. They overtone sing, which allows them to create overtones on top of a fundamental note that they're singing. Now, of course, when they do that, the voice is behind the lips and the mouth. So the voice comes into your mouth, you position your tongue really carefully with the roof of your mouth and behind your teeth, and then you can split the frequencies and you can create a tune on top of a drum. Now, in the case of these, your lips are vibrating to make the note. So if you're going to alter the tone by moving your tongue around, it shouldn't work because it's behind the tone generator. But the thing about these is that when you play them, it's not just the instrument that you're playing. You're playing from your diaphragm. So the actual full instrument is the whole length of your diaphragm, your lungs, up into your mouth, into the instrument, and out the end. That's the full length of the instrument. Now, if you deliberately alter the tone, this is what you get. Or in the case of the female, there's the voice of the god and the goddess. Very simple, very easy to do. You just make a particular size of mouthpiece and you can create that mystical, unearthly sound. Now, so let us say that these are the origins, which we know they are, of the Bronze Age horns and trumpets that come afterwards. Of course, cattle horns don't survive. They dissolve. They're made of keratin, which is like your fingernails. They dissolve. But we can depart slightly from actual archaeology and say that we know for sure that these are the predecessors to the surviving Bronze Age horns and trumpets. Question is, how far back do these go in Irish culture? What's going on? How far back? And because Newgrange is cattle-based and because it's working the same religion as the Bronze Age horns, it's the same idea, we can make a fairly safe assumption that this idea goes back as far as Newgrange. So there you have the god and the goddess being played as animal horns in ceremony about 5,000 or maybe more years ago. But now we'll move forward again to the Bronze Age. Now, they would have to have evolved from the animal horns that you can see there's no doubt about where these come from, but they're beautifully made, they're beautifully designed. So because they were able to make them, because they were able to cast them in bronze, they were able to design them. And when they could design them, they could perfect anything that was imperfect in an animal horn. Animal horns will never be musically perfect, but these are, the designs are mathematically and musically perfect. So one would think that these are going to sound even better than the animal horns. So we'll let you decide. I'll play and see what you think. Here's the male. In bronze. Now that's the Bronze Age. Now we know these were played at the inauguration of kings. Therefore, it's very likely that something like that was being played on them. So these are 1,000 years before Christ. We evolved from there into the Iron Age. Now in the Iron Age, in the late Bronze Age and the early Iron Age, using sheet bronze had been developed, where you cast a lump of bronze and then you beat hell out of it with hammers, possibly for weeks, until you flatten it into a thin sheet. And then you can bend it into shapes. You can make, most importantly, you can make beautiful instruments. What they wanted to do was they wanted to make them bigger, and they wanted to make them more dramatic. They wanted them to go up in the air to look really good. So, this is an example of one from, this is from Tipperary and also from Wales, because we do have them in Britain. Now you can see it's a semicircle. If I turn it around like that, you see, get it around. I can up. This one. Okay, I won't worry about that one. Up. Oh, there we go. In there. Now, if I do that, you can see. You can see the involvement from the cast bronze ones of the Bronze Age, except that the cylindrical aspect of it is much, much longer. So you've conical here, you have cylindrical here. Now this particular one here, what survives of the original one is from here to here, survives in Ireland, and then half of that survives in Wales. But we were able to look at another complete example and then recreate the original instrument. But it comes from this, that was from Tipperary. And we go back to the book. We go back to the Bronze Age again. These are from the south of Ireland. The smaller ones I showed you are from the north. And when they moved down to the south, they made the cylindrical aspect much longer. But it still uses the same principle, and you can create, it's designed to create the beautiful overtones. voices again, those beautiful ethereal voices that you can get out of them. So now, so they have evolved them into the language. And here we are. This is the one here. This one is from Armagh. And this is all these, by the way, are reproductions. If you want to see original instruments, they're reclining in museums.
Yeah.
And that's why we got going, because we looked at the originals and you can't play them. There they are, they're solid. And when we first looked at them, nobody had a clue how to play them. But in over 30 years, we've learned so much about it. And now we think we've cracked what their primary purpose was. So we were able to look at this one and say, right, there you go. This is we can have this bit here and this bit here. And we put them onto the other bit that we have left from the other one. We're able to create a reproduction of the Tipperary Welsh ones from this. But of course, how is this going to produce the voice of the god or the goddess? Now, I'm going to turn this into an S shape, because you can do that. And they actually did that with their big curved horns in Nepal. They turned them into an S shape. Now, here we go. Now the sound is getting even more powerful. That's a really powerful sound. But of course, it's not the only thing they can do. Because they made them so much longer, you can now play more notes upon them. And this is where I'm going to ask Maria, will she come up so that we can play the other important thing, which is that they are played as a pair, male and female. Even though the pair are now the same, it's still the same principle, male and female. Can I give you that one? And I'll take the other one. This one was made in Scotland in 1998. This one was made in Nepal. This one here. So we play them together. We play several different notes to give you an idea of what they sound like. You ready? Okay. Thank you, Maria. Very good. Now we've got, as well as the beautiful altered tones, we've got melody and we've got parade. So we've got the god and the goddess, the inauguration of the king and queen or both, and we've got entertainment. So it's really starting to move on. But we go back to our Tipperary ones, because we want to play something special for them. A couple of weeks ago, we were invited down to my family seat down in Tipperary, because I'm an O'Dwyer, and my family seat is the Rock of Cashel. And it just so happens that there were visiting dignitaries coming to have a look at the Rock of Cashel. And we were invited to welcome them there, visiting royalty. And of course, we were delighted to do that. And as part of that, we composed a special fanfare for the Prince and the Duchess. I have to call you again. There we go. No. Now, normally these two would be in a circle. So you put them up in the air like that, play them. But because the ceiling is so low here, we can't do that today. So what we can do is put them into a big group. So here we go. Now, we can play them like that. Okay, are you ready? Yeah. Okay, you ready? Okay. 1, 2. Thank you, Maria. Okay. So there we have a connection going from Newgrange, which is 5,000 or more years ago, a religious connection, because we're talking about a god and a goddess, which is a balance. It's a balance, perfect balance of the sun and the earth, the way one works with the other. They won't operate independently of each other. Well, in fact, the sun could quite happily go on, but the earth wouldn't last long if there wasn't the sun shining upon it and giving us all life. And of course, when we move on from the Iron Age, in the 1st century before Christ, we move forward 300-400 years, we move into Christianity. Now, of course, Christianity is a completely different religion. It's the single deity with the 3 deities, and it's not really compatible with the earlier religion at all. But they still incorporate it. This is our connection. This is what legitimizes our contribution to the Galway Early Music Festival, because this is early medieval. It's about 700 AD. This is a blow up from an illumination from the Vespasian Psalter, which is a book of Psalms that was written in Kent. But the illumination that goes with it was undoubtedly done in Ireland. And if you look here, this design there, that's a water lily. Now, you have exactly the same design on the right end of that Iron Age trumpet. The same design, which is 800 years earlier. But yet you have that follow through from pagan, or pre-Christian, if you like, I don't like the word pagan, pre-Christian Ireland, right through into Christianity. And the other really important aspect of this is that you have here, you have wooden horns banded in bronze. You have 2 of them, a pair. So these this is all Christianity, but these represent the earlier religion, male and female, sun god, earth goddess, because they are almost identical to the earlier Bronze Age ones, except they're in a straight line. Now we just happen to have a pair of them with us. They're made of yew wood and they're wrapped in sheep bronze. And I was very sick making these because yew wood is very poisonous, deadly, but it's a lovely wood to carve with, and it's a sacred wood. So here we have these making a contribution to an overall band sound. Now, what sort of contribution would they make? What could they make? You have cow horns here with your hands in the end, and you can change the notes. You have clapping going on here and dancing, maybe 110 beats per minute. These guys we think are early pipers, and then you have a lyre. But these lads here, what they do is they play a drone and they put overtone on it, because that's what the ancient instruments did. So I'm going to call you again one more time, Marie, if I may. I'll play one first myself, and then I'll get Marie, we play them together, and you can get, now this is an actual sound from about 700 AD, which is really rare, because we wouldn't have these, only an original of these survives in Enniskillen. It's in the museum there. So I'll play, what do we do? Oh yeah, okay. Well, I'll go to camera there. I'll play a note, and then with the overtones, and then we play together. It's exactly the same thing. It's designed for it. You know, get it? Thank you, Maria. Now, when you hear that, thank you very much. You have to think about all the other instruments that are going on there to imagine what the full sound actually was. But by playing those, we know what the backing track was, if you like. And we also know what the tuning was, because these are tuned to middle C, which means the tuning wasn't really any different than what we have today. So it survived all the way through to the 8th century. The concept of the sun god and the earth goddess. St. Patrick gave out about sun worshipping in Ireland. He didn't like it at all, as he wouldn't. But there you have a continuity of spirit and music and ritual and the meaning of the earth and the sun and the meaning of all of us and why we're here. And of course, you have an equality between male and female. Now, as far as I know, this is the only religion that actually does that. It gives an absolute equality between them. So there's the story we have so far, the voices of the god and the goddess of Ireland. Now, has anybody got a smartphone?
No, nobody does.
No, well, if you want to take out your smartphones, please, those who have them, and I want you to type into them ancientmusicireland.com. Yeah, if you have a smartphone, type that in. ancientmusicireland.com. There's a shop in there. You can listen to music. There's all sorts of things you can check out. It's just been completely revamped while we were sailing the SS Cocoon up in Connemara for a year and a half. It's all there, ancientmusicireland.com. Now, for those of you who, old Luddites who come from the last millennium, like myself, we have some CDs, if anybody would like to buy a CD, of the overtones of Irish music. It's various different tracks. There's an original Iron Age trumpet, which is at the National Museum in Dublin, being played on the album, and there are Bronze Age horns originals being played. Now, if anybody's in London, on the 17th of June, we will be presenting at the British Museum. And if anybody's in Stockholm next weekend, we'll be presenting there. So thank you all very much. Many thanks to the Galway Early Music Festival. We're going to leave them here for a while, so you can go up and look at them. Any questions? Delighted to oblige. Thanks again.
Sounds great. The next on the schedule is a beautiful concert taking us to the church, which really kind of shows the theme of the festival, science. Lovely pieces that show musicians thinking about science, thinking about astronomy, really going to be great. So, if you have any questions, so you want to just come up with just fine. And for the Zoom, I think we'll just end now. So thank you very much for attending. And hope you thanks very much.
This is